Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I'll be sharing my thoughts and feelings on episode 9 of Ready to Love Miami. And for this video, I'll be giving a brief episode recap, followed by an honest rating, and I'll share my thoughts on the connections for the episode. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. At the start of the episode, Nephew Tommy meets with the guys at the men's lounge. Nephew Tommy starts by announcing that Blake has 9 lives, which is something that even Stevie Wonder could see at this point. But Nephew Tommy tells the guys that they'll have to introduce their best friends to their connections in order to see which of the lovely ladies are the best fit. Now in my opinion, nothing new was really revealed during the Q&A sessions with the men's friends and their connections. And I also feel that the true cast connections have already been solidified by this point, and the stragglers are just on the show so the season has enough episodes to show us. But by the end of this episode, Marcia and Sue-Ann get nominated for elimination, and surprise, surprise, Marcia got the boot. Now in my opinion, this elimination was a little bittersweet, and I'll truly miss Marcia on the show. Her body was absolutely flawless, but more importantly, I never saw her being involved in any of the drama or foolishness that some of the other women on the show were neck deep in. But I saw pretty early on that the guy for her was not on this show, and I'm glad that she didn't have to settle. Furthermore, it seemed like Blake and Sue-Ann are this season's Swayze and Kadian, in that the show is keeping them around, at least until the finale, despite most of the cast members wanting them to go home. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I will give this episode a solid 3. While I felt that the episode was a waste of time, I was happy that this episode, for the most part, was drama-free, and I liked the vibe that most of the guy friends brought to the show while talking to the ladies. But with that out of the way, let me share my thoughts on the connections. First, we have Andre, who brings his friend Jermaine to meet Jeffrey and Cynthia. They meet at Andre's place, they're sipping wine, and when it comes to the Q&A session, in my opinion, Jeffrey was given very rehearsed answers, while Cynthia is given answers that are straight from the heart. So while Cynthia may not speak as eloquently as Jeffrey, I can tell that she means what she says. Unfortunately, Andre disagrees with me and feels that Cynthia was the one that gave the rehearsed answers. But Jermaine was the tiebreaker, and he felt that Cynthia was the best fit for Andre. The uncomfortable truth with all of this is that Andre is more physically attracted to Jeffrey, while Cynthia is definitely the better fit for him. And while Andre is entitled to his preference, I think Cynthia should seek somebody who wants her. Next, we have Mark Anthony bringing his friend Mark to meet Mercedes and Jeffrey. And I gotta say that this season has been somewhat difficult to keep up with all the Marks, the Anthonys, and the Andres. But Mercedes and Jeffrey arrive on the scene, and just like with the first meet and greet scene, as Mark Anthony's friend is asking the two ladies his questions, Jeffrey is giving off very robotic, rehearsed answers, while Mercedes is speaking from the heart and having a more fluid conversation. When the ladies leave, Mark views Jeffrey as a huge problem, while viewing Mercedes as the right woman for Mark Anthony. And once again, I gotta agree with the friend on this. Mercedes has been my number one pick from the lady side from the first episode, and I think she will make any worthy guy pretty happy. Next, we have Lyndon bringing his friend Troy to meet Morgan. Troy seems to be a fun-loving guy, and he's pretty friendly with Morgan. But when the topic of Nairgate comes up, Morgan admitting to nairing the guy was a huge red flag for Troy. I think the part where Morgan said she researched what she could do to get revenge without getting arrested pretty much let Troy further know how crazy Morgan really is. Now, while Troy feels that Lyndon needs to leave Morgan alone, Lyndon is hypnotized by the beauty and booty, and he still wants to flirt with danger. To that, I say good luck. We then have a scene with Blake bringing his lady friend LaShawn to meet Sue-Ann. I will say that LaShawn is very beautiful, but in terms of her personality, she's essentially the female version of Blake, which is a tad bit weird. But we see her interviewing Sue-Ann and playing therapist with some of Sue-Ann's responses. It seemed like LaShawn was impressed with Sue-Ann, but something tells me that LaShawn is the type of woman that Blake would usually go for. And I'm thinking they may have did a thing or two back in the day. We have a scene of Tony bringing his friend Antron to meet Marcia and Morgan. Antron did what he was brought there to do, which was vet the women. But Morgan essentially treated the Q&A session like a competition, and she showed bits of her crazy side. Marcia, on the other hand, was clearly not trying to compete with Morgan, but I appreciated her authentic responses to Antron's questions. When the ladies leave, Antron liked Marcia, but you could tell that Morgan was more of Tony's speed. And I guess that Morgan's Nair story does not scare Tony because he's a few years away from getting that Michael Jordan special himself. And lastly, Anthony brings his best friend Miriam to meet Cynthia, Mercedes, and Suanne. And to be honest, this scene was pretty much filler. None of these women have Anthony as their top connection, and Anthony really hasn't done anything to make himself their top connection. Suanne was very vocal about Anthony not showing her any attention. Mercedes barely said a word during their entire scene, and Cynthia answered Miriam's questions, but I could tell that Cynthia views Andre as her second pick. In my opinion, either Cynthia self-eliminates before the end of the season, or she and Anthony pick each other, but their connection ends before the reunion. But this marks the end of the review. Feel free to leave all comments below in the comment section, and I'll reply to everybody. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.